On August 29th, 1883, the thermometer nailed crooked to the post outside Greeley Mercantile read 103 in the shade, and there was no shade worth naming in Cinder Flats by noon. Heat came up off Main Street in wavering sheets that made men seem to bend at the waist like grass in wind, though there was no wind either, only dust and the smell of hot horsehide, old beer, and iron from the blacksmith yard. Flies clustered in the corners of eyes. Dogs slept with their tongues flat and gray. Two boys from the freight office had spent most of morning throwing stones at the telegraph pole by the stage stop because the line had gone dead 3 days before, and no one had bothered to shoo them off it. By supper hour, a dry thunderhead shouldered up from the south and gave Cinder Flats 10 minutes of hope and 4 drops of rain, each one darkening the dirt like a coin pressed into skin. Then the cloud moved east and left the town to its own thirst again. Brittany Coleman stood in the doorway of her smokehouse with her sleeves rolled to the elbow and a smear of salt on her jaw, watching that cloud leave as if she could shame it into turning back. When it didn't, she went inside, checked the curing hooks, and measured another pound of coarse salt into the brine crock anyway. Luck wasn't a plan. Shelves were. In Cinder Flats, most people knew Brittany less by face than by joke. "Pickle girl," the men in the saloon said. "Storm bride," said women who had never once entered her yard without lifting their skirts from the dust like contamination might climb the hem. "The one who salts for ghosts," said acting sheriff Lyle Dent, loud enough for laughter. Brittany had heard all of it. She had also heard a grown man sob over an empty feed bin in February. Her father used to say hunger had a sound before it had a shape. First irritated voices, then thin voices, then no voices at all. He and her mother had come west with 2 mules, 1 wagon axle wrapped in rawhide, and a wedding Bible already missing Psalms. By the time Brittany was 15, they had survived 3 failed harvests in 6 years. 1 flood year that stripped seed, 1 locust year that left stalks like broom straw, and 1 drought year so hard the well rope cut a new groove in the pulley from overuse and still came up muddy. They lived because her mother knew preservation as if it were scripture. Tallow rendered clear and poured into jars with cloth seals. Apples sliced to moons and dried on screen racks. Beans layered with ash and bay in ceramic crocks. Pork packed under 2 inches of fat. Vinegar mother kept alive through winter like a banked coal. Seed corn rubbed, sorted, waxed, and hidden where rats couldn't read God's will. When other families traded wedding silver for flour, the Colemans traded jars. When Brittany was 16, her mother made her salt down 20 pounds of beef alone, while fever shook her hands and taught her ratios between chills. 1 gallon boiled water, 1 1/4 pound salt, ½ pound brown sugar if you had it, a fist of pepper if you didn't. Keep the meat submerged. Keep records. Never trust memory in lean years. Lean years eat memory first. By 26, Brittany kept a ledger with 3 columns in iron gall ink. What was stored, what was spent, what was promised to whom if winter bit hard. She knew exactly how much lard remained in July, 23 stoneware jars, average 5 pounds each. She knew seed reserves in muslin sacks by variety and likely germination rate. She knew that if frost hit by first week of October and freight from Las Cruces was delayed 2 weeks, Cinder Flats would run short on beans and lamp oil before Christmas. She knew because she counted. Counting made men uncomfortable. It turned boasting into arithmetic. The town board called her in once that spring, not to listen but to be amused. 5 men at 1 planked table in the rear room of O'Malley's saloon. 2 cattle owners, 1 freight contractor, 1 merchant, and Lyle Dent with his badge polished to a mirror and his boots up on a chair rung. "Miss Coleman," Dent had drawled. We're grateful for your concern that civilization is ending before winter. Again, it isn't civilization, she'd said. It's storage. You've sold through reserve grain and replaced none. You've no public cistern watch. The North Line's been cut twice this month and no rider sent to verify. If raiders hit the outlying leases, town's got 3 days' flour if everyone crowds in. The merchant had laughed first, fingers tapping his till key on the table edge. 3 days if everyone's eating from your kitchen, maybe. 4 if they don't panic, she replied. Fear is unbecoming, dear, Mrs. Cabot told her after church the next Sunday, smiling with all her teeth while women around her pretended not to listen. People need confidence. Confidence doesn't boil beans faster, Brittany said. The smile had tightened. That was when Storm Bride caught on. Mockery didn't stop work. It only changed where you did it. Behind her smokehouse, a woodpile hid the newest part of Brittany's project. A hatch set flush into packed earth, hinges blackened with soot and tallow so they wouldn't glint. Below it, 6 steps dropped into cool dark that smelled of limewash, cedar, and damp clay. Her first cellar, dug after the second failed harvest, had been little more than a pit lined with scrap plank, useful for potatoes and terror. This one she'd expanded over 2 summers in hours, stolen before dawn and after chores. 14 feet long, 10 feet wide, roofed with cottonwood poles, overlaid with reed mat, canvas, and 2 feet of tamped soil. She had bartered for every piece. At Greeley's, 50 pounds coarse salt, $1.75. 3 kegs of nails, cut and mixed sizes, $2.10. Canvas drop, patched but sound, 80 cents. Lime, 2 sacks, $1.20. Pitch, 1 tin for ceiling seams, 40 cents. She paid in preserved peaches, soap cakes, mended shirts, and 6 days helping Mrs. Greeley through childbirth. Inside, shelves ran along 3 walls, each board marked in charcoal with month and contents. Floor bins held potatoes cushioned in straw and wood ash. A corner rack cradled waxed seed crocks, mouth-sealed and tied with twine tags. Along the north wall sat 6 water barrels, bung tight and raised on bricks so damp wouldn't rot the staves. Above them hung a slate with chalk marks, capacity by barrel, refill date, and where emergency casks were buried beyond the property line. Those casks were her most ridiculed labor. 3 old whiskey barrels lined with pitch, packed in shaded cuts near mesquite stands west and north of town, each with a scrap of red cloth buried 6 paces east to mark location if landmarks burned. She didn't tell many adults. Too often, once an adult knew a cache site, arguments started over who controlled it. She told children because they remembered routes taught as games and followed them without turning maps into a quarrel. On Tuesday evenings, she'd gather 6 of them under the pretense of teaching sums. She taught sums, yes, but she also taught where to run if bells rang twice, how to wet wool and tie it over mouth and nose, how to find the ditch line to the old kiln and stay low and smoke. She made it a contest. Fastest pair to identify North Cask Marker won a jar of pickled okra, or 2 boiled sweets if sugar had come through. Miss Cole, why we gotta learn this? Little Marnie Ruiz asked once, frowning over her slate. So if grown folks have a foolish day, Brittany said, you can still have a long life. By late August, the signs she trusted had lined up like fence posts. Telegraph dead. 2 separate reports of riders shadowing freight west of Black Arroyo. Mesquite bloomed thin. Well level at the Coleman lease dropping before monsoon end. And men in town still drinking as if September came with guarantees. She took her ledger and a packet of figures to the board again. They gave her 10 minutes and 3 jokes. Ration now, she said, palm on the paper. Not famine ration, just measured allotments. Put watchers on public wells. Move lamp oil from freight shed to stone store. Start bucket drills at dusk." "Bucket drills?" O'Malley barked from the doorway, wiping a glass with a rag dirtier than the wood. "What is this? School for old hens?" "Fire breaks cut between outbuildings," Brittany continued over him. "And assigned night watches outside North Road." Dent spread his hands. "To guard against your ghost riders? To guard against being surprised?" The freight contractor squinted at her columns like they were personal attack. "If we announce rationing now, prices climb and people panic. You trying to corner winter trade with your jars?" Brittany stared at him until he looked away. "I'm trying to keep children from eating boiled leather in January." No motion passed, no order given. She left with her papers and the familiar taste of iron at the back of her tongue, anger held there so it wouldn't spill. That evening, she traded 8-quart jars of tomatoes and 6 pounds smoked rabbit to old Mateo Velez for 2 sacks of black powder and a cracked handcart. She paid the tinsmith's widow in candles for 10 lengths of sheet metal to line an evacuation trench near her smokehouse. She sent stable boy Nicky Holt with a list of names, widows, laundrywomen, 2 former vaqueros too stiff for ranch work, but steady with shovels. By moonrise, 12 people had agreed to meet before dawn. None of them sat at board tables. At first light, they started cutting a covered passage from smokehouse to cellar vent, bracing with scrap plank and wagon tongue pieces. Brittany measured depth with a marked cane and kept tally as if wages were involved, because records made labor feel real. 2 feet down at entry, 3 at midpoint, 4 near the turn where smoke would travel overhead. Canvas soaked and layered over lattice, earth packed firm. Estimated crawl time for a child, 30 seconds. For an elder, 1 minute 20 if assisted. Miss Coleman, Widow Price puffed, leaning on her shovel. "You build in Noah's Ark?" "No," Brittany said, driving a nail through brace strip. "Just a place where panic can't decide for us." By dusk, her shoulders burned, palms blistered raw under her gloves, and she still had jars to rotate and livestock to water. She was skimming scum from a cooling kettle when she heard hooves wrong for evening traffic. Too fast, too uneven. 1 horse lathered and spent. A boy pitched off the saddle before the animal stopped. Eli Garner, 12 maybe, ranch hand's son from the outer Coleman leases, face streaked with dirt, and something darker gone brown in the heat. His shirt front was stiff. He clutched a bundled neckerchief to his chest with both hands, fingers white. Miss Britt. His breath hitched so hard she thought he might split a rib. They come at sundown. Pa said run to you." She caught him by the shoulders and lowered him to the trough edge. "Who came?" "Riders. 5, no, 7. He shook his head violently. "Masked some, not all. They shot Mr. Harlan in the yard, burned the tack shed, left." He swallowed and made a sound with no word in it. "Left no one talking." "Your pa?" Brittany asked. Eli stared at the dirt between his boots. "I seen him fall by the corral. He's dead." Brittany took the bundle when he pushed it at her, unwilling and desperate both. The cloth was a marshal's neckerchief, once blue, now black-red and sticky, even half-dried. Inside lay a badge, silver dulled with dirt except where fresh scratches cut bright across the star. She knew it before she touched it. Everyone in Cinder Flats over 10 knew it, though most pretended not to. Amos Pike, Territorial Marshal. Pike had buried that badge 5 years earlier after Black Arroyo, after panic, vigilantes, and bodies lined in dust, while men swore they had mistaken who was enemy and who was family. He'd walked away from law and took up fence mending west of town, where no one asked him to tell the story straight. Eli scrubbed at his eyes with a blood-streaked wrist. "Found it by old pike post, road fork. Dug up and planted there, like they wanted us to see." Brittany felt the world narrow to inventory again, the only way to keep fear from becoming noise. Telegraph lines cut. Nearest fort 2 days by hard ride. Outlying leases hit. Message planted, not hidden. This was no rumor to be laughed out of a saloon room. Disaster had moved from weather to schedule. She wrapped the badge back in the kerchief, stood, and called for Nicky to saddle the mule. "Where we going?" Eli whispered. "To town," Brittany said, "and then to the one man who buried this." "To town," Brittany said, "and then to the one man who buried this." She put Eli on the mule because his knees shook too hard for a saddle, tied the lead rope to her wrist, and walked fast enough that dust climbed to her skirt hem in little storms. Night in Cinder Flats never cooled proper in August. It only changed from oven heat to breath heat, and by the time she reached Main Street, her back was damp, and the kerchief bundle in her hand felt heavier than Silver had any right to feel. O'Malley's was still loud. Fiddle at the rear table, cards slapping, somebody laughing too hard at something not worth the air. Brittany stepped straight through the bat wings with Eli behind her and laid the blood-stiff neckerchief on the nearest clear plank. "Boards in session?" she asked. Lyle Dent looked up from his glass as if she were a fly he'd already waved off once. "At this hour? No. Men are eating and minding peace." "Then start minding it." She unwrapped the cloth and turned the badge so lamplight hit the lettering. Coleman outer lease was hit at sundown. Garner dead. Harlan dead. Tax she'd burned. Riders planted this at Pike's old post. For 3 beats, no one spoke. Then O'Malley barked a laugh that broke the room open again. "Well now," he said, "Storm Brides brought us theater." Eli flinched like he'd been struck. Brittany kept her hand flat over the badge so no one could pocket it for a joke. Dent rose slow, sauntered over, and bent close enough to smell the blood. His mouth tightened for half a second, then settled back into boredom. "Boys frightened. Folks see shapes after dark. Could be rustlers. Could be a family quarrel gone bad. Ain't a war. 7 riders," Eli whispered, voice cracking. "Masks. They shot Pa at 10 paces. Dent didn't look at him. You got no sworn statement, Miss Coleman. No body viewed by law. No warrant to rattle town. You can view bodies before dawn if you mount now." He picked up the badge by 2 fingers and let it dangle. "And this could have been dug by any fool with a shovel. Pike buried half his life out there. Maybe you dug it yourself to make your point." There was a murmur around the room, low and eager, the way men sounded when cruelty came cheap. Brittany took the badge back and rewrapped it carefully, as if neatness might hold the walls of her temper. "Send riders." Dent drained his glass. "I'll send 1 deputy at first light. That satisfy your apocalypse? It gets people killed." He smiled without warmth. "Then pray louder." She turned before her tongue cost her what little cooperation remained and led Eli out into the street. Behind her, the laughter resumed, louder now because it had chosen a side. Amos Pike's place sat west of town where the cottonwoods gave up and scrub took over. Fence rails patched, gate hanging half an inch low, 1 lamp burning in a window with no curtain. Brittany knocked once, then again. Boots crossed plank. The door opened. Pike had gone gray in the beard, but not soft anywhere else. He looked at Brittany, then Eli, then the bundle in her hands, and his face emptied out. "No," he said before she spoke. "Whatever this is, no." She unwrapped the kerchief on his table. Blood had dried dark in the fold lines. Pike did not touch either cloth or badge. "I buried that under a post 3 feet down," he said. "Someone wanted it found. Then they wanted me blamed." "They wanted you warned," Brittany said, "or summoned." I don't much care which if the result is movement. Outer lease is dead tonight. Pike poured water from a crock, set a cup near Eli, kept his eyes on the badge like it might bite. Dent knows and laughed. That tracks. Will you come identify this as yours in front of the board? His jaw worked once. Board never liked me with a badge. They like me less with memory. Come anyway. Silence sat a while, thick as wool. Outside, a coyote called somewhere dry and mean. At last he said, I'll come at dawn. Not tonight. If I walk into O'Malley's now with that star, half the room reaches for whiskey courage, and the other half for old stories. Brittany hated the delay. She also heard sense in it. Dawn, then. Bring your old logs if you kept them. Pike gave a humorless breath that almost passed for a laugh. Didn't keep much. Kept enough. She left Eli on Pike's cot with a blanket and walked home under a sky with no cloud, only stars sharp as filings. August 30th, 1883. Sunup came hard and white. By first light, she had 14 names on paper and ash under her nails. Work spread because she treated it like work, not panic. She divided tasks by strength, not status. Old vaqueros on perimeter trenching where steady rhythm mattered more than speed. Laundry women on wool soaking and cloth mask bundles. Stable boys on water relay routes. 2 seamstresses cutting canvas sleeves to fit over bucket handles so blisters wouldn't slow lines at hour 2. She posted a slate on the smokehouse wall with columns copied from her ledger. Water. Cellar barrels 6 full slash, hidden casks west. 3 full slash north 2 at 3/4. Fuel. Cooking wood 11 days / emergency green timber. Stack 2 cords. Smoke heavy. Burn slow. Food reserve, shared. Beans 182 pounds. Flour 147 pounds. Dried apples 41 pounds. Salt pork 96 pounds. Vinegar 9 gallons. Medical. Carbolic low. Clean linen 34 strips. Needles 26. Poppy tincture scarce. She marked what was private and what was pledged. And she signed her own name beneath in ink, so no one could claim confusion later. By mid-morning, the passage under the smokehouse became 2 passages. 1 crawl trench to the cellar. 1 narrow cut to the old kiln ditch 40 yards east, roofed with wagon slats, sheet metal, and packed clay. She tested each with children first, Marnie Ruiz, Nicky Holt's little sister, and Eli once his hands stopped shaking long enough to follow instruction. Wet wool over nose. Keep 1 palm on left wall. No stopping even if dark presses close. Count your breaths, she told them. 12 to the turn. If someone freezes, pull their boot. Don't argue. She set barrel stations at 4 corners of the block before noon, each with 2 water barrels, 1 sand barrel, 3 feed sacks, and an iron hook for dragging burning timber. She mixed clay slip and lime in a trough for quick fire daub, taught boys to slap it thick at door seams where sparks entered, and had Widow Price boil pine pitch with tallow for patching cracked staves so barrels would hold under strain. At dusk, she rang an old dinner bell twice and ran drills. 20 people came, mostly those already discounted by town hierarchy. She timed the bucket line herself. 11 people, 52 yards to cistern. Pass rate 1 bucket every 3 seconds once rhythm established. A blacksmith's apprentice joined after the first run, wiped his hands on his apron, and studied her chalk marks. Could shave half-second with 2 lines staggered, he said. Do it, Brittany answered, and wrote his name beside the change. She bartered relentlessly through the same evening. Pickled beets for nails, rendered soap for lamp chimneys, 2 jars of peaches for a half roll of wire mesh to keep embers from vents. No speech, no pleading, just exchange and record. Near midnight, she had a handcart fitted as a mobile water rig. 2 50-gallon casks strapped over oak runners. bung plugs tethered with rawhide so they couldn't be lost in smoke. Mateo added a brake block from scrap iron. "If grade runs," he said, "you'll keep your legs." She thanked him and paid in lard and mended harness. August 31st, 1883. Dawn at O'Malley's came with stale beer smell, and men pretending they hadn't sat there half the night. Pike arrived in a clean shirt, jaw shaved, hat brim low. He carried no rifle, only a wrapped parcel under his arm. Dent watched him cross the room with a grin that wanted to be a sneer. "Look what the wash brought in," Dent said. "Corpse from Black Arroyo." Pike set his parcel down and unfolded it. Old arrest ledger, a map with grease pencil roots, and a tin box of spent cartridge casings tagged by date. "You asked if this badge was mine," he said. "It is. Dug up yesterday. Planted on North Road." Dent shrugged. "Past relic. Means nothing now." Pike's voice stayed level. "Means someone wants this town paying attention." The freight contractor leaned back, boots on table edge. "We got commerce to run, Pike. Can't shut streets every time a widow and a penitent share a nightmare." Brittany stepped in before Pike's temper chose for him. Motion 3 orders: ration release by household count, guard rotation on public wells, and moving lamp oil from freight shed. "Denied," Dent said too quick. "No emergency declared." "On what grounds?" "On grounds I'm law and you're not." There it was. Institution, plain as pine. By noon, the mockery had shape. Someone chalked Brine Queen's army on her smokehouse gate. Boys sang a rhyme outside the Mercantile. Pickle girl, save us from the rain," until Mrs. Greeley chased them off for blocking customers. At church social, a basket set aside for Brittany's committee was quietly removed. Mrs. Cabot told 3 women, loud enough for hearing, "Hysteria is contagious. Best not indulge it." When Brittany went to buy powder at marked price, Dent's deputy stood at the counter and said, "Order from acting sheriff. No bulk powder sales to unauthorized civilians." "Since when?" "Since this morning." She set down 2 jars of preserves anyway. "Then sell me nails." He hesitated, then pushed the keg over. Control rarely closed every door. You learned the hinges it forgot. O'Malley offered free whiskey to anyone who could imitate her ration speech. Men took turns standing on a chair and counting imaginary beans while the room roared. One of them tied a dish towel round his shoulders like an apron and called himself Miss Coleman's General of Pickles. Dent laughed hardest. Brittany heard about all of it by supper. She kept stirring the bean pot, while Nicky repeated the jokes with angry tears in his eyes. "Let 'em spend breath," she said. "Breath is one thing they still got plenty. But they're making folks scared to come train. Then we train those who come." She took social blows where they landed and converted them into logistics. Church hall closed. Drills moved to Velez Yard. Mercantile gossip poisoning volunteers. She posted supply needs on her own gate with quantities, no rhetoric. Dent block powder. She increased sand stock and soaked more wool blankets in trough water laced with vinegar to cut smoke sting. That same dusk, 37 came anyway. Some openly, some by alleys, some with hats low and shawls up. When 3 ranch wives arrived with baskets hidden under shawls, dried corn, clean bandages, a roll of cotton twine, Brittany didn't ask if they'd mocked her yesterday. She logged the items, thanked them, and put their names in the pledge column like anyone else. August 31st, 1883. Morning into night, the signs kept coming, each one small enough for a lazy mind to excuse, and together too sharp to ignore. First, horse prints on the North Wash Crossing, shod in mismatched patterns, 7 mounts at least, riding single file where locals rode loose. Mateo brought word before breakfast. "They doubled back once," he said, drawing with his boot in dust. "Scout habit. Dent called it drovers cutting across. Second, a freight wagon overdue from Mesilla by 36 hours, then 48 by midday. Team not found at usual camp. Contractor blamed axle brake and kept playing cards. Third, telegraph line repaired by town boys after dinner. Cut again before noon the next day, this time with wire carried off instead of dropped. That wasn't weather. That was intent. Fourth, 2 dead mules dragged into Miller well overnight, bellies slit, water fouled for 20 households by dawn. Dent said prank. Brittany said denial. She sent crews with lime and spare barrel casks, rerouted water map, and posted runners at every filled trough. Fifth, smoke columns on far west flats, thin at first light, then gone. Not brush fire shape. Too narrow, too timed. She climbed the feed tower with Nicky and a spyglass borrowed from a surveyor's widow. Around mid-afternoon she saw what she feared. Mirrored flashes from a low ridge, 3 quick, 2 slow, repeated. Signal, not sun accident. Could be prospectors, said the widow when Brittany reported it. Prospectors don't flash code toward town and hide after. At evening board hour, she returned to O'Malley's with a written list signed by 28 households, requesting formal emergency measures. Dent read the first 3 lines, snorted, and tossed the sheet back. Petitions don't run law. Neither does bravado. He leaned in. You keep gathering people and stocking barrels like a private militia. I can charge you with inciting panic. For moving water. For whatever keeps order. Order isn't quiet, she said. Order is readiness. He stood, chair scraping. Get out. Outside, thunder muttered far south with no rain behind it. Dry lightning lit the horizon in flat white sheets and showed dust plumes on the north road, where no scheduled herd should have been. Brittany didn't go home first. She went to Pike's. He was on his porch cleaning a rifle that looked older than both their grievances. She handed him the petition and Dent's refusal in 2 sentences. Pike listened, eyes on the road. I told you Don would buy nothing, he said. It bought me proof, she answered, and time for trenches. He looked at her then, really looked, at the chalk on her skirt and blood-brown stain still shadowed in the kerchief fold where she'd washed and failed to erase. How many with you? 37 regular. More if fear changes sides. He nodded once, slow. Fear always changes sides. As if summoned by the words, a rider came hard from the east edge, horse lathered, shouting before he hit the first hitch rail. Freight yard, he yelled. Somebody fired the haystacks. The rest drowned in the sudden clang of the town bell, struck not in ceremony but in panic. Once, twice, then again without rhythm. Far off, beyond the store roofs, an orange tongue climbed into the dark where no sunset belonged. Brittany was already moving when Pike stood. Brittany was already moving when Pike stood. They ran downhill toward town center as the bell hammered itself hoarse above the church roof. The first clear look came at the corner of Mercer and 3rd. The freight yard was a sheet of orange, haystacks going up in rolling bursts as if fire breathed inside them. Someone had lit the outer bales first, then the center, and by the way the flames climbed, someone had broken lamp oil among them. Not an accident, Pike said. No, Brittany answered. It's a map. It was August 31st, 1883, 9:24 by the courthouse clock, and the air still held at 89 degrees after dark, dry enough that sparks traveled like insects. Wind came hard from the south, in long hot pulls that flattened flame 1 second and flung it sideways the next. Horses screamed in the freight corral. Men shouted over each other, not to each other. Dent stood in front of the freight office, waving his revolver like he could order heat to obey. Form a line. Form a damn you line. Half the men ran for buckets. Half ran for rifles. The rest ran nowhere useful. Brittany vaulted a hitch rail, grabbed the sleeve of the blacksmith's apprentice, Caleb Dunn, and pointed with an open hand. 2 lines, staggered. Cistern to east wall to oil shed. Don't cross. He snapped into motion before arguing and bellowed for the others. Training beat pride when there was no time to posture. Pike shouldered through smoke toward the livery side, rifle low, scanning roof lines instead of fire. 2 shots cracked from somewhere behind the grain wagons, not aimed to hit, aimed to turn heads, to herd panic. "They're driving us," Pike shouted. "Keep off Main." But Main Street was where people ran when they lost direction. Straight, wide, familiar, and tonight lit like a target lane. At 9:31, the first failure hit. A cask by the freight platform blew its bung and sprayed burning oil in a fan. 1 bucket team scattered. 2 men rolled with flames on their sleeves. Brittany shoved a feed sack into a trough, slapped it over one man's back, and kicked him toward dirt. "Down! Roll! Keep your face covered!" She looked once toward Dent. He was screaming at 3 deputies to mount and chase shadows beyond the yard fence. "Water first!" she shouted at him. "Law first!" he shouted back, and spurred away with them into smoke. By 9:40, embers had crossed to Kittredge's warehouse roof. The freight contractor himself stood in his nightshirt at the loading door, clutching keys and yelling about invoices. "My ledgers! Get my ledgers!" The roof answered with a sound like musket fire as dry beams split. Men who'd ignored Brittany for months now threw themselves against his doors. Too late. The whole front bowed in and belched sparks 10 feet high. Kittredge dropped to his knees in the dirt, coughing black, watching 2 years of profit and every private account curl into cinder. Across the yard, O'Malley tried to haul whiskey barrels out his back room one-handed while slapping at a curtain with the other. Someone had kicked in his side window and tossed fire inside. Whether raider or drunk fool, no one knew. By 10:02, his painted sign, O'Malley's house, fell in 2 pieces and vanished behind flame. The room that had laughed at Pickle Girl glowed like a stove and then turned hollow. Brittany's own plans bent under pressure, too. At 10:15, the crawl trench from smokehouse to kiln ditch collapsed at the midpoint when a borrowed wagon tongue brace, rotted at one end, snapped under shifting soil. 2 adults were inside when it dropped, a stable hand and a laundry yard teamster, while children waiting at the trench mouth were shoved back clear of the fall. Dirt came down to shoulder depth, smoke pouring after it. "Hands! Dig with hands!" Brittany dropped flat and clawed earth until nails tore. Widow Price and Eli were beside her in seconds. They dragged the stable hand out by his boots, coughing mud. The teamster came last, limp, then gasped once and started retching into the dirt. "No more through this route," Brittany said, voice shaking once and then steadying. "Board it and mark red." At 10:37, the church bell rope burned through and the bell gave one long, crooked peal before going silent. That silence did more damage than noise. People heard it and thought the town had lost. By 11 o'clock, the temperature near the freight yard reached heat you could feel through your teeth. Tin warped. Window glass bubbled. The town's nearest water source, Miller Well, had been fouled the day before. Now 2 working pumps couldn't keep up. The east cistern dropped a visible handspan in 40 minutes. Bucket rhythm slowed as arms failed. Then came the second wave. From alleys north of Main, masked riders drove 3 riderless horses with burning brush tied to saddles. The animals bolted straight toward the boarding houses. Doors burst open. People poured out, and the raiders fired over their heads to push them where they wanted them, toward the broad center lane between Mercantile and Saloon ruins, where crossfire from both ends could pin a crowd. Pike saw it first and fired twice low near the lead horse's legs, turning it toward open dirt before it reached porches. "Move them east," he yelled. Ditch line, not main. Brittany climbed a water cart tongue and screamed until her throat shredded. Not main. East ditch. Follow wet cloth. Children first. Because she drilled routes, enough people obeyed to matter. Not all. 20, 30, maybe more still flooded Maine by habit and terror. Gunshots cracked from dark windows. One man spun and fell against the bakery hitch post. A woman dropped to her knees over him and would not move until two laundry girls dragged her by the elbows under smoke. By midnight, August 31st had become September 1st with no break except the date in Brittany's head. At 12:18 a.m., Dent rode back lathered and wide-eyed with one deputy missing and no riders caught. His own office had taken sparks while he was gone. The front shutters burned. Jail records and warrant books were already ash. He stared at the ruin and looked suddenly older than the hour before. "Where are your men?" Brittany asked. He had no answer worth speaking. From 12:30 to 2 a.m., the fight turned from save every building to choose what keeps people alive by dawn. Brittany chose water points, granary wall, and exit corridors. She let 3 sheds burn to keep one cistern. She posted children she trusted as runners with wet scarves and chalk marks on sleeves. 1 stripe for water needed, 2 for injured, X for blocked route. Eli ran until his feet bled through his socks. At 2:47, wind shifted north and gave them 20 minutes of advantage. They contained fire at the granary's south wall with clay daub and soaked blankets. At 3:10, a stray shot shattered a barrel hoop and dumped 20 gallons into dust. At 3:40, 2 riders tried to torch the schoolhouse and were driven off by old Mateo with a shovel and a pistol too rusty for comfort. The sky went from black to iron gray around 5:20 a.m. Smoke hung low over cinder flats like a second roof. The freight yard was gone. Kittredge's warehouse was a skeleton. O'Malley's saloon was 4 standing posts and a stovepipe leaning at prayer. Dent's office had no records and no door. The catastrophe lasted 9 hours that first night and did not end so much as pause for daylight. September 1st, 1883 came up hot again. 86 by 6 a.m., 101 by noon, 104 at 3 in the shade of a wall that no longer had a roof. Daylight made cost visible. They laid the dead first in the church annex, because the church itself still smelled of scorched rope and fear. Names went on a slate when they were confirmed, and beside each name Brittany forced herself to note time and place, because later someone would lie about how this began, and she was done giving liars room. Caleb Dunn, age 19, blacksmith apprentice, died 12:11 a.m. at East Cistern when chain pulley jammed and he climbed the frame to clear it under fire. Shot through collarbone, bled out before Dr. Halvers arrived. In his pocket, 2 bent nails and a chalk stub with stagger line written on his palm in smudged letters. Widow Price, first name Eleanor, 62 by her own count. Died 1:34 a.m. after trench collapse rescue and smoke exposure. She had kept digging after her cough turned wet, waving Brittany off with, "Ark don't float if we quit, girl." She sat down against the smokehouse wall once and didn't stand again. Mrs. Clara Greeley, mercantile owner's wife, died just before dawn when she went back into the rear room for her infant son's blanket chest, though the child was already outside in another woman's arms. They found her by touch, not sight, near the threshold. Others came in with burns, shattered hands, grazes turned septic by dust. Dr. Halvers reported 2 children at the annex being treated for smoke exposure and kept them behind screens with the quiet cases while the triage line moved. Old Mateo had a crease across his scalp and kept insisting he was fine enough to carry, though blood ran into his ear. Hunger arrived faster than grief had room for. With freight sheds gone and the mercantile's back inventory spoiled by smoke and water, people lined up by instinct where food had once been sold and found black beams instead. Miller well remained poisoned. 2 smaller wells produced brown trickles. By afternoon, mothers were wetting lips with vinegar water to make children think they drunk. Brittany's block looked different not because it escaped, but because preparation gave it shape. Her cellar held 43 people through the worst hours. Infants wrapped in damp flour sacks, old men coughing into wool. 2 wounded deputies laid along the north wall between seed crocks and pork jars. Her water barrels had marks, so she could measure loss instead of guessing. Her slate turned panic into ration. Half cup per child every 4 hours. Adults by labor load, medical priority first. She hated every number and trusted them anyway. Beyond that block, vulnerability was naked. Families who had laughed at drills now asked where the wet cloth route was after their porches were gone. Men who had mocked bucket lines discovered blisters at 1 hour and collapse at 2. The churchwomen who'd called fear unbecoming stood in smoke with skirts dark at the hem, fanning embers from doorframes with hymnals. And still the raiders circled, not full assaults by daylight. Probes, shots from ridge, 1 torch tossed and stamped out, enough to keep everyone frayed and sleepless. Around 4 p.m., a wagon carrying the injured to the annex took fire from the north lots. Pike and 2 vaqueros returned it to cover, but one of the injured, Deputy Marlin, died before sunset, with his hand locked around Brittany's sleeve, whispering apologies to a mother in Socorro. By evening of September 1st, Dent's authority had burned with his records. He still wore his badge, but people stopped waiting for his orders and listened for whoever had water, roots, and a plan. That mostly meant Brittany, and she did not have time to enjoy irony. Night threatened a second strike. They dug faster, deeper. They posted watches in pairs because one alone went foolish from smoke and dread. Brittany's voice gave out and returned as a rasp. At 11 p.m., September 1st bled into September 2nd. 36 hours since the first bell, and every face looked older. The help came just after dawn on September 2nd, when the temperature was already 90 by 8, and the sky the color of dirty brass. Brittany was bent over the ration slate, recalculating bean weight against head count, when shadows filled her yard gate. She looked up, expecting another list of injuries. It was Mrs. Cabot first, hat gone, hair loose with ash in it. Behind her stood 6 women from the church circle, 2 men from O'Malley's kitchen, 3 children she recognized from families that had mocked the drills, and, at the back, Lyle Dent with his left arm in a bloody sling. No one spoke for a second. Mrs. Cabot swallowed. "Miss Coleman," she said, voice thin and formal as habit. "The east boarding row is gone. We have 32 people at the school foundation with no water and 1 barrel split. 2 babies. 1 old man with burns. We were told—" Her mouth trembled once, then steadied. "We were told you kept reserves." Dent took off his hat. It looked like it hurt him more than his arm. "I should have listened," he said, not meeting her eyes. "I'm asking for aid." Every slight she had swallowed in the past month seemed to crowd the doorway with them. Brine Queen, Ghost Salter, Panic Woman. She could spend this moment collecting debts. It would feel good for 10 seconds and kill people by noon. "Eli," she called, "fetch 2 cast teams. Nikki, runners to school foundation and annex. Tell them triage station moving here." She turned to Mrs. Cabot. "You can carry?" "Yes." "Good. You're on water cloths and infant rationing. No one drinks standing over the barrel. Measured cups only." Mrs. Cabot blinked, then nodded like someone receiving instructions in a language she had mocked and now needed to live. Brittany faced Dent next. "Your arm needs setting. Sit. Later." Now, or you drop in the lane and I lose a pair of legs." She pointed to a stool. He sat. While she splinted him with 2 ruler slats and torn linen, O'Malley stumbled in, half carrying a freight teamster with a burn laid raw across his neck and shoulder, jacket cut away and black with soot. O'Malley's own eyebrows were singed off. His hands shook. "Didn't know where else," he said hoarsely. "Found him by the pump. Put him on the table." Brittany didn't ask why O'Malley had laughed, or whether the man's family had ever set foot in her yard. She poured clean water over the wound until soot ran clear, then honeyed cloth, then wrap. "Hold him steady." O'Malley obeyed like a man in church. Within 20 minutes, her yard became what the town should have built months ago, a relief station run by whomever would work. Churchwomen stirred bean water beside laundry girls. A former vaquero measured morphine drops under Dr. Halvers's direction. Dent, pale and sweating, directed 2 teenagers to clear rubble from the school route using Brittany's marked map. Mrs. Cabot held a crying baby while learning how to count spoonfuls aloud so no child got skipped. Brittany moved through them all with no ceremony, assigning, correcting, lifting, binding. At the gate, a runner collided with Pike and nearly fell. "North Ridge," the runner gasped. "White cloth up, someone waving." Pike looked at Brittany, smoke etched into every line of his face. "Parley sign," he said, "or trap. Both can be true." She wiped her hands on her apron, leaving rust-red streaks from dried blood and clay. Behind her, people who had once treated her as a joke were alive because she had chosen not to. "Then we go careful," she said. "But we go." "Then we go careful," she said. "But we go." Pike stopped her at the gate with 2 fingers on her sleeve. "Not with your apron like that." She looked down. Blood, soot, and clay had turned the cloth into a flag of every ugly hour behind them. "No one on that ridge needs me clean. They need you alive." He jerked his chin toward her smokehouse. "Get the ledger." She hesitated, then went. In the cool cellar, she reached past beans and pork jars and pulled the wrapped packet she had kept dry and hidden since spring, copied freight tallies, seed contracts, old board motions, and the one set of numbers nobody but her had bothered to compare. Territorial treaty grain allotments versus Cinder Flats receipts. Beside it sat a cracked leather notebook Pike had left 2 dawns ago when he'd finally admitted he had kept enough. Names, dates, wagon counts, and Black Arroyo incident notes never filed. When she came back out, Pike was waiting with his old badge in his hand. "Pin it," he said. Brittany blinked. "I can't wear that." "Not you." He thrust it at his own shirt and cursed when his fingers shook. She took it, opened the pin, and fixed the star over his heart through smoke-stiff cloth. For 1 second, he looked like a man hauled backward through years against his will. "Authority's ugly," he muttered, "but it still counts on paper." "Then use it for paper," she said, "not glory." They took Eli, 2 runners, and a white scrap tied to a shovel handle. They did not go up Main. They took the ditch line, then the broken adobe wall behind Miller's fouled well, then crawled the last 10 yards to the rise where the white cloth had been seen. A boy waited there. Not much older than Eli, maybe 14, left hand wrapped in dirty bandage, eyes rimmed red from smoke and sleeplessness. He stood with empty palms raised and spoke first in Spanish, then halting English when he saw Eli's confusion. "From Joaquin Rojas," he said. "He says no more children burn if talk now." Pike answered in Spanish too, rusty but clear enough. The boy's shoulders loosened a notch. He pointed toward the grain warehouse, still standing by Miracle and Mud. "Midnight," the boy said. "Inside, no snipers, no torches if no trick." "And if trick?" Pike asked. The boy looked older in that moment. "Then all burn." September 2nd, 1883, 11:47 p.m. The town smelled of wet ash and scorched flour. Moonlight turned smoke to moving cloth between buildings. Brittany set up what she could before the meeting, because talking never stopped blood by itself. She moved 3 casks from her private reserve to public line and chalked ration marks right on the staves where anyone could see. She had Mrs. Cabot and 2 laundry women teach cup counts to whoever still had hands steady enough. Half cup adults resting, 1 cup laboring, quarter cup every hour for fevered. She made children practice wrapping wool strips over nose and mouth, not because they hadn't learned before, but because fear erased memory. She posted Eli at the supply slate with a stub of chalk and told him to challenge anyone who took without mark, no matter the surname. When O'Malley staggered up asking for whiskey for pain, she handed him willow bark tea and made him haul sand sacks until his complaint burned out with his breath. "Never thought I'd take orders from your pantry," he rasped. "You still ain't," she said. "You're taking orders from arithmetic." At the school foundation, where 32 displaced folks huddled under canvas, she opened 6 jars of peaches she had once imagined selling at Christmas and stirred the syrup into boiled grain for children too shocked to chew. She showed Mrs. Greeley's sister how to skim soot off water with cloth and ash. She taught Dent's surviving deputy to count pulse before giving poppy tincture. Knowledge, given plain, multiplied faster than pity. Across town, expensive failures smoldered in heaps. Kittredge's iron safe split from heat with promissory notes welded into black bricks. O'Malley's imported whiskey gone in one extravagant fireball. Dent's polished office sign half melted in the dirt beside his badge sash buckle. In Brittany's yard, a row of humble stoneware crocks, beans, vinegar, salt, held the line between order and riot. At 12:03 a.m., she and Pike walked to the granary. The warehouse interior was dark except for 2 hooded lanterns set on grain bins. The smell of singed wheat and old burlap filled the air. 3 raiders stood near the west wall, rifles visible, muzzles angled down. Their leader stepped out last. Joaquin Rojas was younger than the stories of him, maybe 30, maybe less, with a scar pulling one side of his mouth and eyes like chipped flint. His coat sleeve was soaked at the shoulder. He nodded once toward Brittany's packet. "You brought numbers," he said. "You brought children into a fire," she answered. His jaw tightened. "Children were already in your fire years ago. Black Arroyo." Pike did not deny it. "Say what you came to say." Rojas took 1 step closer. "My father hauled treaty grain north under U.S. seal. 3 wagons, signed by agent at Fort Selden. Your syndicate men took 2 off route at Cinder Crossing. Said, security seizure. Sold it back at winter prices while reservation camps starved. When our people protested, your board called us raiders. Then Black Arroyo, men with badges and men without shot, anyone brown or hungry enough to look guilty." He tapped his chest with 2 fingers. "I was 9. I watched my mother bleed out under a wagon because no one wanted witnesses." His eyes cut to Pike's star. "And that badge in blood. My courier dug where you buried it and planted it on Coleman land by my order. A warning and a challenge. Come back under law and answer what was done in its name before we burn the whole account." Silence hit like a dropped beam. Brittany heard every breath in the building. She untied her packet and spread papers over a grain crate. Territorial allotment tables, freight receipts with altered totals, Kittredge's duplicate invoices with missing wagon numbers, and Pike's old notebook page listing confiscations that were never entered as evidence. "Your father's route appears here," she said, pointing, "and here, where 2 wagon loads vanish from official count but appear in private sale 2 weeks later, under syndicate credit. Names attached: Harlan, Cabot, Kittredge, Dent's predecessor, and 2 board signatories. Rojas leaned in, scanning by lantern light. One of his men cursed softly in Spanish. "So you knew," Rojas said. "I suspected," Brittany said. "Now I can prove." He gave a bitter laugh. "And you think proof feeds graves?" "No," she said. "Food feeds the living. Proof keeps the next grave from being called an accident." He lifted his rifle a little, not aiming, just reminding. "Why should I believe any law from this town?" Pike stepped into lantern edge, badge glinting dull. He held his own rifle low, barrel toward floorboards. "Because this isn't their law tonight," he said. "It's territorial process with witnesses from both sides. You disarm now. I deputize neutral escorts, and by noon, we march you and your wounded under white flag to Judge Mercer's circuit camp at Arroyo Seco. You get to testify. Public. Names on record." Rojas spat to the side. "And if your townsmen decide rope's quicker, then rope goes through me first," Pike said. Brittany added, "I've got food for 10 days if rationed strict. Enough for townspeople and prisoners both. You burn this granary, everyone starves, including your hurt men." Rojas stared at her a long moment. "You'd feed us after what we did?" "You came to kill a lie," she said. "I won't answer with another." One of his men shifted, uneasy. Outside, somewhere close, a shout rose. Then another. Word of parley was leaking. Rojas heard it too. "Your people won't accept this. They don't have to like it," Brittany said. "They have to survive it." At 12:41, Rojas lowered his rifle butt to the floor. At 12:42, he slid it away with his boot. By 1 a.m., 12 raiders had stacked weapons in 2 piles, rifles to one side, pistols to another. 2 were too wounded to stand. Brittany sent Eli for stretchers and wet cloth. When Eli saw who lay on the floor, men he had watched ride through his father's death, he froze, shaking. "Move," Brittany said quietly. His eyes filled. "Why should I help him?" "Because you are not them," she said, "and because your pa sent you to me for a reason." He swallowed hard and bent to lift. The crowd arrived before dawn with ropes. Not all the town, 40, maybe 50 men and older boys, half-armed, faces blackened with soot and grief. They surged into the warehouse yard, shouting names of dead. Somebody yelled, "Hang the lot!" Somebody else, "No trials for butchers." Dent was among them, pale and one-armed, trying and failing to command what he no longer controlled. Pike stepped onto the loading platform, badge visible, rifle still low. By territorial authority, a stone hit the post beside his head. Brittany climbed up next to him before anyone could stop her. Her throat was raw, but anger gave it edge. "Look at me," she shouted. Some did, mostly because they weren't used to her sounding like that. "You want blood because you've got fresh graves. I do too. Eli does. Mrs. Greeley's family does. But if you lynch prisoners in this yard, you bury every dead person twice. Once in dirt and once in lies. The men who stole from all of us are still alive and rich unless these witnesses talk." She held up a ledger page, soot-streaked but legible. "This is Cabot's grain sale against treaty allotment. This is Harlan's side invoice. This is why raids came. You killed testimony. You protect thieves." The rope line hesitated. O'Malley, of all men, stepped forward, face haggard and sober. "She's right," he said hoarsely. "I heard Kittredge brag winter '79. He could sell famine twice." Thought it was whiskey talk. Maybe wasn't. Mrs. Cabot appeared at the edge of the crowd, white as flour. "My husband signed nothing," she began, then stopped as Brittany turned the page and her husband's signature stared back in ink. No one moved for 3 heartbeats. Then old Mateo, head bandaged, planted his shovel in front of the first rope carrier. "You pass me. You do it knowing you're guarding thieves. The first rope dropped to the dirt. Then another. By sunrise, the lynch crowd had become an escort line. For 10 days, Cinder Flats ate from Brittany's stores and what salvage could be cleaned. Beans, cracked wheat, salt pork shaved thin, vinegar water, broth from bones nobody would have bothered boiling in good times. She measured every ladle with a carpenter's eye and logged every issue by name and labor. Prisoners ate in the same schedule as townsfolk, under guard, no extras and no starvation theater. Wounded raiders were bandaged beside wounded deputies, and Dr. Halvers cursed them all equally when they pulled stitches loose. On September 5th, a territorial cavalry detachment rode in from Fort Stanton, late, dusty, and stunned by what they found. A burned town, armed truce, and a woman with an ink ledger that made their captains swear out loud and then ask for copies. By September 8th, under cavalry escort, linemen had the westbound telegraph restrung and tested. The first verified wire out read, Cinder Flats Holding. Court and relief required. Mercer's clerks added a standing backup order with the rebuild papers. If wire fails again, Ridge mirror code and mounted relay launch within 1 hour. On September the 7th, Judge Mercer arrived in a jolting buggy with 2 clerks, set up court under the church annex rafters, and took testimony from dawn to lamplight. Rojas spoke. Pike spoke. O'Malley spoke. Mrs. Cabot, trembling but precise, identified her husband's hand on warehouse drafts. Eli spoke in a whisper that carried farther than shouting. When Dent took the stand, Mercer asked one question first. Did you ignore repeated warnings by Citizen Brittany Coleman regarding security and ration readiness? Dent looked toward Brittany once, then down at his sling. Yes. Did you obstruct acquisition of powder and supplies for civil defense? Yes. Did your negligence contribute to loss of life? A long pause. Yes, Your Honor. By September 10th, warrants were signed for surviving syndicate principals, Cabot, Kittredge, and 2 ranch partners. Harlan was already dead from the initial raid. Dent was removed pending inquiry and later barred from territorial law office. Some called it justice. Some called it humiliation. Brittany called it paperwork, finally catching up to hunger. The reckoning came not in one speech, but in a meeting that smelled of fresh-cut pine and wet lime. September the 12th, 1883. The town gathered in the half-repaired schoolhouse because it was the only space left with enough roof to hold everyone. Benches had been scavenged from church pews. Children sat on flour sacks. Men who once owned half the valley stood in patched shirts beside laundrywomen and stable hands. Amos Pike leaned against a post near the back, badge removed again, expression unreadable. Judge Mercer had ordered a civic reorganization hearing. If Cinder Flats wanted territorial reconstruction funds, it needed a binding plan, transparent stores, and a relief committee not controlled by the old board. The murmuring stopped when Mercer called, Miss Brittany Coleman, front. She walked to the table with her ledger and set it down. The sound was small, but in that room it carried. Mercer folded his hands. This assembly has asked what compensation or office you seek in light of service rendered. A few people shifted, waiting for her to demand what they thought she'd earned. Money, title, maybe Dent's chair. Before she could answer, Mrs. Cabot stood. She had no hat now, no lace gloves, only smoke-stained cuffs and a face 10 years older than 2 weeks before. I'd like to speak first, she said. Mercer nodded. Mrs. Cabot turned not to the judge but to Brittany. I called you unbecoming in church. I laughed when men called you names I repeated at my own table. I taught my daughters to smile polite and ignore you. While I did that, you taught my grandson how to breathe through wool, and he lived because of it. Her voice shook, then steadied. I was wrong. Publicly. Entirely. One by one, others followed. O'Malley, hat in both hands, admitted he had turned warning into entertainment. Greeley confessed he had refused her ration proposal because he feared losing sales. Dent, pale and reduced, said, "I treated caution as insult. That debt is on me." Even boys from the telegraph pole came forward, eyes down, to apologize for cutting jokes into her fence. It wasn't tidy. Some apologies were heartfelt. Some were self-preserving. Some men said nothing at all. But the mockery was no longer ambient weather. It was named in public under witness. Mercer rapped once for order. "Miss Coleman, your response?" She looked out at the room, the faces she had fed, buried, argued with, and saved against their own pride. She thought of what revenge would taste like and how quickly it would sour. "I don't want your chairs," she said. "I don't want your storefronts. I don't want to be Queen of Ashes." A few brittle laughs died immediately. "I want 4 things written into charter with signatures and penalties." She held up one finger. "First, communal granary under public lock, not private syndicate key. Inventory posted weekly where anyone literate can read and anyone not can have read aloud." Second finger. "Second, cistern and well maintenance schedule by district, mandatory labor rotation, including board members and merchants. Water is not women's work. It is town work. Third, winter ration drills twice monthly from September through February. Children trained first because children remember roots when adults argue. Fourth, standing relief committee elected by block with seats reserved for laborers, widows, hired girls, and vaqueros, not as charity, as governance. No emergency decision valid without at least 2 of those signatures." She slid a prepared draft across to Mercer. "And one more clause. No mocking, obstructing, or retaliating against preparedness efforts by any office holder. Fine on first offense. Removal on second." There was a murmur, then a low rumble of assent that grew as people recognized themselves in the list. Work they could do, not speeches they could cheer and forget. Mercer read, brows lifting. "You drafted this when?" "Between bucket lines," she said. Pike barked a short laugh from the back. Mercer looked up. "Assembly, all in favor of adopting the Coleman Charter for Reconstruction Governance." Hands went up slowly, then quickly, then almost all at once. Even those who hesitated found themselves watched by neighbors who had seen fire too close to gamble again. Opposed, 3 hands. None of them met Brittany's eyes. "Motion carries," Mercer said. His clerk scratched hard at the page. Brittany exhaled for what felt like the first time in days. January 4th, 1884. First hard freeze. The new granary stood where the old freight office had burned. Walls thick adobe over stone, roof tin-sheathed with spark breaks, vents screened in wire mesh. Inside, shelves were labeled in both English and Spanish. A slate board listed inventory in chalk and charcoal marks for those who counted by symbol. Beneath it hung a bell rope that had been soaked, braided, and tested by children until their hands blistered. At dawn, the whole town turned out for the first winter ration drill under charter rules. Mrs. Cabot, now committee quartermaster, called cup counts with military precision, while Nicky Holt, promoted from stable boy to water captain in every mine but title, timed bucket relays against last month's numbers. O'Malley ran soup kettles and cursed anyone who tried to skip line order. Dent, no badge now, hauled ice from cistern lids in silence beside men who once saluted him. Eli Garner, taller by 3 inches and still too thin in the cheeks, stood by the entry ledger reading names as families checked allotments. His handwriting had improved. His eyes had not forgotten. Brittany moved through the drill with a clipboard and no patience for nostalgia. Faster at Station 3, she told a pair of ranch wives who had once avoided her shadow. If your mitten slips in smoke, you lose fingers. Again. Yes, ma'am, one said and meant it. At noon, with everyone inside for chili steam and stove heat, Amos Pike arrived carrying a small wrapped bundle. He set it on the granary table without ceremony. Finally got the blood out best I could, he said. Brittany unwrapped cloth. The badge lay clean, not polished bright. Just honest silver with old scratches still visible. Beside it, folded neat, Eli's father's neckerchief remained stained dark, where nothing could wash clean. Eli looked up from the ledger and went still. Brittany took both pieces to the door beam where a new iron hook had been set. She hung the badge first, then the kerchief beneath it. No plaque. No grand speech. Just two objects at eye level where every person entering for food would have to see them. Pike stood beside her, hat off. Reckon that's a strange shrine, he murmured. It's not a shrine, Brittany said. It's instructions. August 29th, 1893. 10 years to the day from the heat reading at Greeley's post. Children who had not been born during the fire raced each other between cistern markers in a game everyone now called left wall, 12 breaths. They treated it as play. Their parents watched with the particular tenderness of people who know games can be lifelines. Inside the granary office, ledgers sat in a locked cabinet with duplicate copies stored in two houses, one east, one west. Committee seats rotated on schedule, and no meeting convened without labor signatures. The old jokes had not disappeared entirely. Towns never became saints. But mockery of preparedness had become social poison nobody wanted on their tongue. Eli, 22 and broad-shouldered now, ran the seasonal inventory audit with spectacles he pretended he didn't need. Mrs. Cabot's granddaughter logged cistern levels in both languages. Nicky Holt, official water marshal under territorial appointment, inspected pump gaskets with a seriousness that made younger boys grin and imitate him. Brittany, gray threading her braid, stood at the threshold while summer thunderheads built honest rain in the south. She still kept her private cellar. She still distrusted luck. But she no longer worked alone in the dark to do what should be public. A traveler from Albuquerque, seeing the badge and kerchief above the door, asked Elas, "Whose hero relic is that?" Eli shook his head. "Not hero relic, warning." He pointed to the chalkboard where today's figures were posted clear and plain. Town used to laugh at the woman who counted. Then we nearly burned into a story folks tell over graves. Now we count first. Outside, the first drops began to fall, fat and real this time, darkening the packed earth in round coins. Children shrieked and danced in it. Brittany stepped into the rain and let it soak her sleeves without flinching. Preparedness, she had learned, was mercy in work clothes, and mercy, when written into beams and barrels and habits, could outlive fire.